Hello and welcome to Business Finishing School. Let your business brain finish what your entrepreneurial heart started. Our catalyzing statement is a successful entrepreneur inside of every business. Enjoy this module.
Welcome to Module 30, 10x Thinking. So Rick, this is a segue basically from the last module we did. Bring us into it. What is 10x Thinking?
All right, let me put it in the perspective of last month, which is fresh in your mind. All of us were asked to pick a date 10 years in the future. And imagine that date 10 years in the future in all aspects, your business life, your personal life, your physicality, where are you living, how many employees do you have, what your revenue is, and all of those types of questions. Now we want to change your relationship to those objectives. And what do I mean by change your relationship? Well, right now you're looking at your future from an incremental perspective. We want you to look at it from a 10x perspective, because by imagining it from a 10x perspective, we think that'll increase the odds of you having a blowout decade. So, Patrick, you have planted this seed into our members' minds at the last boot camp. You did a great presentation, which was highly rated, and so I'm going to let you lead the subject. I do want to say, though, that we have gone through 10x in several different businesses that we're in, and when you start thinking about this, your initial instincts are incremental. So when we were asking people at boot camp, for example, where do you want to be in 10 years, I specifically remember one person who's listening right now say, I want to be at $2 million in revenue. And that was great, except for they were already doing $500,000 or $600,000 in revenue. So to go from $500,000 or $600,000 to $2 million in 10 years, that's incremental growth. What we want you to do is have, what would be a better way, the opposite of incremental would be
exponential,
non-linear, next level, all of that. So we want you to not look at how am I going to get to 10x from where I am now, but instead you have to completely change your paradigm, completely change your level, completely change your perspective. Almost like, it's interesting, when I was reading about Dell Computer recently, they went from $1 million in revenue to $100 million in revenue in a few years. That is not incremental revenue growth. And we have somebody in the program who's also listening right now who went from $700,000 in revenue to $2 million in revenue in 10 months. That is not incremental. So with that backdrop, Pat, take it away.
I particularly like this subject because it stretches the bounds of your mind and imagination, and it breaks you out of convention. Rick cited the last BMI, and let me just say, as an aside, that I hope you are all coming regularly to the Business Mastery Intensives, because they're extraordinary experiences that dip you into the culture and kind of drives us deeper into your cells and your DNA, what we've been talking about here for all these years. And the theme of that particular BMI was moonshot, the moonshot, going for this 10x thinking, which is sort of like a moonshot coming from the construct of the United States space program that Rick often cites as, his, one of his favorite catalyzing statements, that we will send a man to the moon and return him safely back to Earth before the end of the decade. Now, mind you, that was like beyond 10x thinking. It was just like it captured the imagination. It was just something that we've never done before, that people for, since the dawn of mankind have stared into the night sky and they saw the moon and they wondered about it. And as, we got more technologically advanced and we started to understand it more, we recognized, what the moon was, what its influence was, et cetera, et cetera. But the idea of actually taking a spaceship there, landing on it, walking on it, getting back in that ship and flying back to Earth was just something that was, science fiction, and even a stretch in the realm of science fiction. So the fact that we even went after it as a species was something that was just marvelous and majestic, and actually then accomplished it. So So when we say moonshot, it's like, what are you going for that's just something that's completely out of the context of your normal thinking, of your expectations, of what you've been kind of living in as far as the boundaries of your life. So now this concept of 10x is that moonshot, meaning most people, as Rick just said, when they think about goals, they're looking at incremental goals. And it's not that that's wrong. It's not that there's something inappropriate about that. But I feel that there's many times a self-limiting factor that accompanies that thinking. So what this module is about and what we want to encourage, and this could be a game changer. Just literally this one module could be one thing that causes you to shift your thinking that will translate into a completely different outcome in your life. That's how powerful this can be. So I really want you to take it seriously and tune in right now. So the idea of 10x thinking is the concept of 10 timesing something. So if your revenue, for example, was 200,000, well, 10 times 200,000 is 2 million. But you can also think about it in other realms of your life, and we'll talk about that in a few moments. So why do we want to approach this concept of 10x thinking? Number one, small multipliers don't ignite new thinking and innovation. That's one of the issues. Meaning, if you want to go from $500,000 in revenue to $650,000 in revenue, you're going to look at things the way you're doing them now and figure out how to incrementally improve upon them to boost things up to that incremental growth that I just cited. So you might talk about upgrading some staff. You might talk about expanding or increasing some of your marketing or any other number of things that would move you from that particular point A of $500,000 in revenue to point B that would be $650,000 in revenue. And there's ways to do that, and you'd have to work hard to make that happen, and you'd have to really get the team aligned, and you would apply all the business finishing school principles toward that objective. And the likelihood is if you were to do that, you would achieve it, and you'd feel good about it, and you'd feel successful about it, and all those things would be true. But the point is that going from that point A to that point B will not ignite any innovation or new thinking on your part. You're basically going to take your current constructs and you're going to figure out how to incrementally improve upon them. So one of the premises that we're putting forth here is that we feel that incremental change is slow death, especially in today's world. Incrementalism, the process of just trying to keep the status quo and make it a little better, doesn't breed the type of creativity and innovation in business that's necessary to compete in today's world. Now, in small businesses, if you got a good toehold out there or a strong foundation under you, you could probably kind of exist for some period of time out there and incrementally grow. But if you really, really want to assure a bigger, better career, business, outcome, et cetera, for the next 10 years, then you have to start thinking in more innovative terms, in my mind. And when you start thinking in 10x, it causes this immersion coming out of you. It's something that emerges out of you that is, I believe, a dynamic that's very powerful and actually exciting. So what 10x does is it pushes you to break limited thinking and see a whole new world of possibilities. Now, I believe that most of us have had 10x experiences. I'll just kind of give you mine as an example. I can remember being in business in the beginning, doing $100,000 in a year, from zero going to $100,000. And that was a pretty major milestone. I said, wow, I felt like I was pretty successful. I was able to start something from nothing and turn it into a $100,000 business. And then I can remember some years after that, going from, and it wasn't very many, probably up 4 or so, I went from that $100,000 level to that $1 million level, and that was 10x. And if I were to review and think about, boy, what was my thinking, what was my approach, what was my experience when I was at the $1 million annual revenue level versus the $100,000 annual revenue level, and there were two completely different mindsets, two completely different points of view and approaches. Then I can remember when I hit or crossed the $10 million annual revenue mark. That was another 10x. And then looking at that, that was a company that had 55 employees. that had a lot of dynamics to it. It was an entirely different team around me, an entirely different energy and heartbeat and system to that business. And the way that I would wake up in the morning and approach my days was a completely different headspace than what it was when I was at $1 million. So this 10x thinking is something that drives these transformations of who you are. And I believe that if you were to engage in what Rick and I are proposing to you right now, that you would start to see that you shift in basically your thinking. You become more imaginative. You let go of some old things that might be limiting you, and you start to move into a new arena.
Pat, let me jump in and add also, watching you over the last 5 years or so, I've noticed that you have 10x'd your relationship with your wife.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit harder to quantify. So I want the listeners and members to realize that this isn't only about business size and revenue. It's also about finding metrics and ways to 10x relationships, to 10x satisfaction, to 10x, happiness. What can you say about that, Pat?
Well, another one is 10xing freedom. It might be that you've grown to a certain amount of revenue, and let's say that, you're a small business, you're some type of a proprietor, you're a doctor, chiropractor, dentist, any other type of a small business, and you don't have this desire to maybe hire a bunch of staff, associates, multiple offices, or any other type of business that you can apply this concept to. And you might say, it's really not my intention. I'm already at, let's say, $2 million, and you're making a lot of profit, and you don't really have a desire to go to $20 million. It's just not your thing. But I bet you almost anybody would say, but what I would love is right now I take 2 weeks off. I'd like to have the opportunity to be off 20 weeks a year, to basically 10x my freedom. And it might mean that you don't take all 20, but you have the freedom to take 20 weeks off if you wanted to. I'll say for you, Rick, something I'm very proud of you for, that I think is a 10x on your part, is that you're taking off for a month and going to Italy with your family. I think that's a 10x move by you. That is completely out of the context of what I think anything I would have seen you do since I've known you over the past several years. And that's a 10x step to me. It could be 10x more contribution. It might be that, my revenue is great, and I maybe still want to grow it to some degree, but I want to have a lot more contribution back. So my contribution used to be one thing, but now I want it to be 10 times whatever that is. So it could be 10x more impact. So there's lots of things that you could look at 10xing.
I also was recently in a conversation with my friend Ken, who decided to 10x his philanthropy. And so not only does he, from 1 year to the next, not only was he giving 10 times more to charity in terms of money, he was also giving 10 times more in terms of time. So he now sits on several boards, and I asked him what the impact was of giving 10 times more money, and he said that his income more than doubled. So you think about what this does to energy in your life. There's a great book that I read a long time ago. I'll put it in the implementation guide, about this notion of when you give money away, it returns to you 10 times. I don't know how the universe works, but I know how human beings work. And I know if you're giving more of yourself, and if you're giving more, not only time, but money, which is a product of yourself, what happens is you start thinking about your life and your productivity differently. And I think that's why the effect of giving of yourself can be a 10 times effect. So there's so many different ways to look at this. The most important thing, though, that I see as you're talking about this is when I went and interviewed all those successful people, what I realized is not one of them grew their business incrementally, not one. And when I meet somebody in a great marriage, they didn't grow that incrementally either. Their marriage went from this level, and then it went up to an exponentially higher level. And it's very hard to grow something incrementally and achieve massive results. It's just we don't have enough time to do that. So it's very, very important that you allow yourself to stop thinking incrementally. It's that thing that we've talked about in the past called win, then play. And, Pat, you might want to shed more light on it, but, the people that organize the Super Bowl, they don't do what most people do when they're putting on an event. They don't worry about selling tickets because they know the thing is going to sell out no matter who plays. So it's one of the only events, or I guess any championship is that way, but it's so different than the real world. These events are the rare occasion when people will buy tickets and go without knowing who's going to play. So think about a rock concert trying to do that. So a lot of businesses, think Apple Computer, they already know that when they come out with a new product, X billions of dollars in revenue will be sold. That is not incremental thinking. That is next level. That is exponential. That is all of the things we're talking about. So, Pat, I'd like to ask you, how does someone orient their mind around not going incremental, but instead coming at it from another level?
I think one of the answers to that question is knowing what things to eliminate from your mind, because and then leaving, that only leaves the positive stuff. So here's what happens: the defenses go up almost immediately when you try to start thinking 10x, especially when you don't have the habit of doing it. So, for example, as you heard me speaking about this, some of the things that might have coughed up for you, metaphorically speaking, in your brain was, but I don't want to be 10x busier, or my customers or patients or what have you won't pay 10x. Or I don't have the infrastructure for that. The typical response, which is an erroneous response, is that as soon as you start thinking in 10x, the first thing that pops up is all the reasons why 10x can't work or won't work or why you don't want it, as compared to trying to literally delete those thoughts, filter them so that they don't come in, put the firewall up and not let them in, because it immediately is a limiting experience or a limiting belief system. So the 10x thinking becomes a habit. 10x thinking becomes a kind of a metaphor for success. It's basically something that is a muscle that you grow over time. I don't expect, for example, that you're going to listen to this once and you're going to say, okay, I got it, and I'm a 10x thinker now. I think you have to just start getting into the habit and the ritual of 10x thinking, and over time you get better and better and better at it. God knows, when we first started to talk about this concept, it was on our accountability calls, Rick, and I bring it up because you people who are listening to this should all be in accountability groups. And to show the power of the accountability group, it was introduced to our accountability group, this whole 10x concept. It was an exercise for us to work on one week. And at first it was like, wow, when I had to do the exercises for the call, I was like, wow, this is, at first it was a little bit difficult for me to try to wrap my brain around and feel genuine or authentic about, representing my view on how I would 10x aspects of my life. But then as I started to search my soul a little bit more and work on it a little bit more, I started seeing these little doors open, and suddenly I was moving to places where I'd never gone before. So I found it to be a really extraordinary exercise. So then, instead of those defensive things that I just cited a few moments ago, your mind might start migrating toward, what activities can I give up to reach 10x? What kind of team members do I need to reach 10x? What can I do to create 10x more value so that way I would get 10x in return? So suddenly your mind starts going to other places.
Yeah, interestingly enough, one of the things we wanted to get to on this module, which is the perfect time to say it, is last month you described where you want it to be 10 years from now. What Patrick and I want you to do now is go back to last month's implementation guide, and if you're not using those implementation guides, I implore you to do that. Take last month's implementation guide, which is Module 29, and take all of your objectives that you put down for 10 years from now and 10x them and see where your mind goes. So if I'll make this up, let's say your revenue today is $2 million and you decided that 10 years from now you want it to be $5 million. Now I want you to put $50 million. And let's say 10 years from now you want it to have a month off per year. What would it be like to have 10 months off per year? I mean, you really start thinking about the world from a different perspective when you start 10xing things. I was recently with a couple friend. We went out on a double date, two couples, and they said they go out to dinner a couple of times a year, and on date night. And my wife and I said, we go out every single week on the same night, and it blew them away. They said, "You mean like 52 times?" We said, "Well, 52 times on date night, and then other nights." And for them, that was more like a 20 or 30x. When you think about how many times we go out on the date and how many times they do. So what I'd like you to do, what Patrick and I would like you to do, is go back to all your goals and experiment with 10xing them, and then bring this to your accountability group. Bring it to your spouse. Bring it to people that you rely on inside your business and say, all right, I want you to envision a world where we're doing $50 million in revenue. That is an interesting notion when you consider the moonshot, the moon landing. When John F. Kennedy said those famous words that will send the man to the moon and return him safely to Earth, it made the decision-making process easier, not harder. It's the same thing here. Why did it make it easier? Because the team was able to rule out anything that wasn't going to get them to the moon and back. So if you pick a goal of $50 million in revenue, as an example, 10 years from now, you probably wouldn't mess around with, ordering paper and supplies for the office. You would put your attention on bigger, better, faster, stronger things. You'd be more strategic. You'd be more oriented around that objective. So getting your objectives nailed and then twisting them to a 10x perspective, it makes your yes-no decisions much clearer, much easier, and it takes us back to another quote we've said over and over and over again, which is the difference between successful people and extremely successful people is that extremely successful people say no to almost everything. This 10x thinking allows you to say no to everything that's not 10x thinking. So the promise of year 3 in the program is accountability. We want you to be accountable to a new future, a future that's bigger than your past, a future that's non-incremental from your past. So you start asking questions of yourself, what's 10x better than what I've had before? 10x more income, 10x more freedom, 10x more contribution, 10x more impact, and anything else you want to add. Patrick, thank you for bringing this topic up because it's made me think about my business way differently. And today, in fact, the day that we're recording, I had a big meeting all morning, knowing that we were going to be talking about 10x, and I started posing the question, and it changed the fabric and spirit and energy of the meeting. So my challenge to you all listening is putting this stuff on the ground and being accountable to it.
Another way to approach this, incidentally, if you're a competitive type person, which I know many entrepreneurs are, you might ask the question, how can I 10x the competition? That's something that will drive you. That's something that would excite you. That's something that would ignite you. Say, I want to 10x the people I'm competing with or competing against, not in a malicious way, but just in that competitive spirit that might incite you and get you to rise to the occasion.
I love that, Pat. 10x the competition. What does that mean? To me, what it means is this. Think about your competitor or a colleague in the same business as you that you look up to the most. The one that's got the biggest business, the best business, they make the most profit, etc. What would it be like if you could 10x their revenue, 10x their profit, 10x their success? On a personal level, you could look at somebody who maybe has the perfect workout or the perfect diet and exercise routine. What would it be like to be 10x healthier than they are? So somebody that you look up to in any regard. You can also find maybe some friends that have an incredible marriage. What would it be like to be 10x better than they are? And this isn't from an envy perspective. This is from where do you really want to be? And wherever it is you want to be, how about multiplying that, and how about picking that as a new target? So 10x the competition, I think, is a really cool starting point to imagine what would it be like.
In part, I think, too, you might want to think about 10xing your visibility compared to them so that you are just more visible, your message is getting to the market. There's all kinds of ways to play with this. So I think what we could do, Rick, is kind of get into maybe a summarizing the concept and ways that they might approach taking some action steps on it.
Let's go.
So just to summarize, 10x should be fun. 10x is not incremental thinking and creates innovation and creativity in your approach towards what you're doing. And I think that what you want to do is listen to this once or twice. What's going to be enormously critical, I can't overstate this, is that you let your team also listen to this module, because they have to get on board with it. And one of the things that I've experienced and I get in the way of feedback is that 10x thinking empowers the group. Google is famous for 10x thinking. As a matter of fact, Larry Page, the co-founder and CEO of Google, there's a whole article on this if you want to look it up in Wired magazine where they interview him, and he talks about 10x thinking and it being the culture at Google, which is why they keep innovating all this wildly crazy and innovative and fun stuff. And they also attract people to them because they have this type of an approach toward their business and going to the marketplace. So it becomes fun for your staff, that they are not in complacency and expected to go through rituals and routines that are mundane in nature, but that they can start to spark their own inner creativity and get excited about the concept of 10x thinking. And you can have different types of contests for the best idea contributed to add 10x to whatever it is you're trying to 10x in your company, for example. If you got together with your spouse and said, let's 10x our relationship, or let's 10x our parenting, you'll start to see things emerge from there. So I think, the first step is, number one, figure out what in your life you'd like to 10x. Just come to a conclusion on that. That would be the first very practical step. Number two, the people that would be related to whatever that decision is. If it's your business, that's going to be your team. If it's your relationship, that's going to be your spouse, etc. Bring those people in and say, I've got an agenda. And that is a 10xing of X, whatever that is. And then start the conversation, and then start applying finishing school principles, which would mean put your values around it, which is the why behind the 10x. Get into your objectives as far as how you're going to make this happen, and manage by them. Start your rhythms and rituals, meaning we're going to put into our calendar a system or a rhythm of addressing and organizing and expanding and innovating on this 10x. That's not a conversation one day that gets dropped and you say you get to it again at some other point in time, but you basically are going to have a weekly 10x meeting to continue to further this conversation until you come up with concrete steps that you're going to take to move toward 10x and wherever the area of your life is that you want to do that.
You can also 10x an experience. I have had this conversation dozens of times, and you and I have experienced personally this situation, Patrick, where someone will be in our accountability group. The accountability group is not providing them the experience that they want, and so they're thinking about quitting the accountability group. And until you ask them the question, what have you done to generate a better experience? So I would say, what can you do to 10x your accountability group? What can you do to 10x your leadership? What can you do to 10x your responsibility in all the various things that you have said yes to? I can tell you over the years that there's been many times where I said, you know what, I am not being responsible for having a 10x experience in the accountability group. And so I step it up. I step up my attention. I step up my my openness. I step up the fact that I'm not going to have distractions, so I won't be checking emails or doing other things. And I force myself to sit in front of a computer and stare at the Skype or the Google Hangout page as opposed to calling in and doing other things. So you can also apply this to the energy that you're bringing to your awareness and attention in all of the things that you are saying yes to. I wanted to make sure that that was clear.
And it is. So I think at this point, you've got it. I mean, if you're listening, you've been listening and paying attention since the beginning, you've got the theme of 10X. I think it dovetails perfectly into last module's theme of 10-year plans. Now you've got this swirl of stimulation in your mind, and it's time to take that and leverage it into your life. So at this point, I'd like to, number one, just again congratulate you for being in the program up to this point and encourage you to continue on. Number two, to implement. So take what we're doing here and start applying it to your life. And number three, that when you start to see results show up, share them with us. Rick and I love to hear about this kind of stuff. So make it happen and then send us the results. And if you don't mind, we will even share them with others to help inspire them.
I want you to know that what Patrick and I talk about off camera and off audio is simplicity, probability, and leverage. And I can't think of a better way for you to have more simplicity, probability, and leverage than picking a goal that's so big that what happens is the universe provides people and opportunities and situations to help you achieve it. It's that massive thinking that allows so much more freedom, whereas incremental thinking forces you to keep all of the crap that you have in place. The employees that you think you need to get rid of, the relationships that you need to move away from. It forces you to keep that and hold on to that tightly and then incrementally grow from there. Whereas if you really embrace what we're talking about today, it gives you so much freedom. And to me, freedom is one of the byproducts of simplicity, probability, and leverage. So with that, Patrick, unless you have any final words, I would like to say thank you for listening to Module 30, and think about the fact that you're in Module 30. You're 30 months in. That's 2.5 years in. What's different about your life? Wow. I would like to hear about that, so post that to the Facebook page. I do read those. I love reading it. It's very exciting to me to watch my purpose unfold in the world. Patrick?
Yeah, I'll just close by saying Rick is extremely sincere in this. This is his purpose. I mean, he loves the stimulation and feedback to see how putting this information out there is really impacting people's lives. And I think this was a 10x experience for him, because as successful as he was in business prior to getting involved in business finishing school, doing this, even though on a, as far as a revenue basis, he is much bigger businesses that he's involved in, and this one will grow, obviously, and is doing well. But the bottom line is his experience as an entrepreneur has been 10x because he's delivering this information to you every month. So, Rick, I'll just say from all of us who have learned from you, thank you for that.
You're very welcome, Patrick, and I've learned so much from you and from the rest of the members. So have a great day wherever you are, and we'll see you in Module 31 next month. Thank you.
Let your business brain finish what your entrepreneurial heart started.